Want to be a female tattoo artist in a mostly male-dominated profession? Find out why it helps to be born in the year of the ox. The Best Worst Idea Podcast. Welcome to the Best Worst Idea Podcast. My name is Frank Hanna, and I am your host. This is the podcast where we talk about creativity, how people find it, and how it's influenced the course of their lives. Today, my guest is tattoo artist Leslie Young. She's been working in the Los Angeles tattoo scene since 2016 and has amassed a pretty substantial body of work. One look at her Instagram account, and it's clear she's not afraid to take risks. She's not afraid to use bold color choices, but more impressive is the level of trust her clients put in her. I'm so happy she agreed to speak with me. So welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
What I want to talk to you about specifically is the creative side of what you do. On one level, it's really kind of easy to say, well, you're an artist, but there's not all artists want to become tattoo artists or work in the field of tattoos. So what I like to do in this podcast is talk about origin stories, because I have a lot of comic book people that I've done interviews with that work in the industry. And so I always look at it what's the origin story for Leslie Young? Can you, where you grew up and your parents and what kind of upbringing you had?
Well, I had always been drawing. So that's one thing. I think I was drawing before I was talking, actually. My dad would always bring home a stack of scratch paper from his work. And it would have stuff printed on one side, but the other side was empty or blank. And so me and my sister would always take from that stack of scratch paper and draw on it. And that became a pretty regular thing. We would do this every day. So I'd always been drawing.
It's crazy that you say that because my father did the exact same thing.
Really?
Where he worked, he would bring home stacks of paper, and sometimes it would be, which is really cool, it would be tracing paper or vellum paper. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So we'd always draw, and then me and my sister were really close. So we would always doodle on each other's papers. And that kind of just became a thing. We we didn't really take that many art classes. Art classes weren't really popular near us. There just wasn't a lot of programs. But we'd always do it at home.
So when you say near us, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in the suburbs, so it would make sense that there would be community centers with that, but it just wasn't there wasn't a huge art community, I guess. There was one art center where you could go and you would it was a camp for kids, and you can make art and stuff, but it was so
kind of basic. And
yeah, it was more of a daycare for kids.
Oh, I see.
It was where parents would just drop them off, and you could do or not do the art, really.
And this was in Orange County? Is that where you grew up?
Yeah.
What's that saying? If, you got to see it to be it sort of thing? If you didn't kind of maybe see that art was the way you could make a living.
I actually had no idea until it got towards time for us, high school, when we were trying to apply for colleges and stuff. And I didn't realize that other schools had AP art studio or studio art.
Right.
And classes where they would take it seriously and do all these things. I had no idea because our school just didn't value those things. They put a lot of money towards sports and stuff. Mm. So that was the thing. A lot of students would use sports to get into college. Not that they weren't academically adept,
but that was the advantage.
But yeah, exactly. So art was not a popular way to go about it.
Yeah, the first couple years of high school for me, I spent most of my life in Catholic school. So the first couple years of high school, it was in a college preparatory school. And not that it was that fancy schmancy or anything, but you had an elective, it was Spanish or German or something like that. And so the only way you could get to an art class is if you flunked out of your language class. And then they'd say, okay, now we'll let you take. So that's how they valued art. They saw it as okay, this is where not dummies go, but it was not something that was in the forefront. It was a fallback, which really sucked because I always felt like I was interested in art and being creative and creating things. But, you weren't shown that this is the thing to do. And it was only until I went to the second or the last 2 years of high school when my family moved. I went to a public high school in Anaheim, and I had some art classes, and it was not that my eyes opened up, but I was so happy that like you could actually spend the time, doing that. So when you were applying for colleges, was art or art design or anything like that part of your thought process, or was it like the family wants you to go into finance, or the family wants you to go into this or that?
Yeah, so I think my parents are funny because they were like only very surfacely supportive of me. They supported me using art as like an elective to get into college. Like, you know how like in college they're like, oh, what have you done? It's like community service and like sports and like I worked at this thing. Like they supported that using like it as like a side piece to get into.
It was something to kind of fill out your resume. Yeah.
And then they only supported it to that point though. Like they would not, if I wanted to go to an art school, if I wanted to like specialize in art or like study art, they'd be like, no, that's not okay.
Well, yeah, because it's as a person who writes for film and TV and comic books, I've done it enough time now because I'm older that my family and friends, they kind of say, oh yeah, no, that's like the thing he does. And they know that there's lapses between the jobs. Like you get a chunk of money and then you have to try and make that work for X amount of months or years.
Yeah, it's like freelance-y.
Right. But it took a while for my family, who are working class, blue collar people, they'd say, oh, is your friend in the film business or does he work?
So is this like, your job? I get that all the time, actually. Like clients will come in and they're like, so like, do you have another job? Like they always ask if this is like my actual like job.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, it's like my main source of income. Like I do this every day.
I mean, that's the thing. Yeah. When people think about doing what someone like yourself does, in their mind, like they may say, oh, I wish I had your life. Because they think somehow that you're just living in the lap of luxury and that you have no responsibility. And, right. Yeah. And it's crazy to me. I what I hear from people a lot of times is they'll say, I want to write, but I just don't have the time. As if time is all that is required, that just somehow you don't have to flex those muscles over and over again to be confident enough to do the thing you do, like which in your case would be being able to not only draw and create and be creative, then you have to like put that onto somebody permanently. Like there's another element to what you do, which is more than just somebody who is really a great, say, graphic designer or illustrator or something like that. Like what you're doing is beyond. It's like the next level.
Oh, I mean, I think I can see that in some ways, but also in other ways, it almost seems different when you've done it so many times too, because you get used to it. And also you really like think about how like short life is too a lot. And a painting would last way longer than a tattoo, for example.
Wow.
Which is like crazy, right? Because people are like,
that is the crazy, I've never thought of it that way.
Right? Isn't that like, and of course some paintings go for like thousands and thousands, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So like it makes sense in that way. But in other ways, it's like sometimes people don't value them as much because it's like a different aspect. Like you're going through like a personal, like almost like, well, it's kind of trauma when you get a tattoo. So it's a lot different in that way. So it's not just like the art itself, but like it's the experience of like getting it.
There's so much to it. I think that's why it's interesting to me, because I've interviewed comic book artists and people and comic book writers, and it's more than just the art. It's that you have to be willing to have somebody trust you enough to put a tattoo on them. And even if you are going and you look at a bunch of tattoo artists, say at an expo or a convention, or even in a shop that has a number of different artists, you're looking through their book, or maybe you know somebody that had a tattoo done by a particular artist, but you're really taking that leap of faith with somebody. And I often see whenever you post like some of the art you've done on your Instagram or on your website, you're really thanking the person for trusting that, like, because it's not necessarily just something that was picked out of a book, or not just some a flash that like is probably on 100 people's arms or something. You know what I mean? It's something unique, or it's a shared vision, and that somebody trusted you enough to do that. And I think I've seen that more than once, that you actually take the time to say, hey, thank you for trusting me enough to let me do this.
Yeah, I think it's kind of wild because, like, as someone who gets tattoos too, like, sometimes you don't necessarily get the same amount of attention to, like, who you are as, like, a person from different artists. Mm-hmm. And, like, it's definitely kind of odd when you go get a tattoo. And, like, I get it because as an artist, like, I can see that happening if you've been tattooing for, like, years, and it's just gotten kind of like not mundane, but like you've done it so many times. But yeah, some artists, you can really tell when they're paying attention to you and like listening to you and like reading your email, for example, and like trying to do their best for you as a person and do a good job with the tattoo itself, versus like, oh, this is just a tattoo, I'm just like gonna just do this. Because I've had that from different artists too, and it's like weird.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think I talked to you about this whenever I got my tattoo from you, which mm-hmm. was what I realized was, just from over the years, is that you really want your tattoo artist to be somehow invested in the piece of work they're doing, right, as opposed to just put this on me. So, and I tell people this too, that say, because they see your tattoos and they want to know about them or who did them, or mm-hmm. they're thinking, oh, I want to get a tattoo. What should I do? And I've said, listen, if you have an idea, if there's something specific you want that can't really be changed, well, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. But if you have, like, say, if it's a character, and say, okay, well, rather than just say, here's a picture of that character, put it on me, you might say, this is the character I want. What do you think? Like, this is the kind of things I'm interested in. Yeah. Can you do a version of that?
Yeah.
Then I've often found too that not only do you get a better tattoo, you may even get a more detailed tattoo than somebody who just says, no, this is what I want. That's it.
Yeah. I think it's funny because I think I'm still relatively young in terms of like my tattoo experience. So I do like hesitate a little bit when someone like does send me like just an image and they don't really specify like, oh, you can do, this is kind of what I want, but like I want you to do what
go
you
to town.
Do. Yeah. But it really like encourages me when they do say that, because then I'm like, oh, okay, like now I have the confidence to like fully do what I want to do, but like still adhere to like their requirements or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes I get just like a reference picture, and I'm also just like I'm like, hey, is it okay? Like, can I like just do this in my own style? Like, I'm still a little bit shy about it because I did spend like the beginning of my tattoo years just doing what people wanted, because I didn't know exactly what style I wanted to do just yet. And so I just do exactly like they want this like manga panel. I'll do exactly that. Do you want this? I'll be like, okay, I'll just do that. And I was just trying to figure out like what's good at the time too.
Yeah, I mean, because it adds so much like pressure. Like if I did some piece of graphic art for somebody in Photoshop or Illustrator or something, and I send it to them and they say, this is shit, can you fix it? Then you go, okay. And then you go back and you fix it.
I'll be like, I'll do whatever I want at that point if that's not what you wanted.
But if you tattoo it, it's too late, right?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where there's more to it than just the image itself, because people have an idealized version of what they think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, so what's your tattoo going to be? This is before I got the tattoo with you.
Oh, right on.
And I said, well, I don't know, but I gave the tattoo artist a bunch of reference.
Yeah.
Well, what did she come up with? I'm like, I don't know. Well, when are you going to find out? I'm like, well, when I go.
Perfect. Yeah.
And they're like, well, that's crazy. And I go, well, no, not really. I mean, here's the thing. It's not like you're going to say, this is it, buddy. And that's all, that's no choice. But in a way, it's like I was trusting you. I could see that you have artistic abilities and that you do a wide range of things. So to me, it's like I wanted to kind of be surprised to see what it was. And Of course, you didn't do something outlandish because you saw what you saw, it might not even have been what you really wanted to do, but it was like, okay, well, this is kind of in the vein of what he wants, so that you're able to do that. And that's kind of the thing. That's why I'm really fascinated by what tattoo artists do. And what makes you an exciting person to talk to is that like you don't fit the bill for what like you expect to see as a tattoo artist. You expect to see some fully tattooed face tattoo, just looks like 1,000 miles of dirt road, just like they've been through it. And that's just not you. You're actually so unassuming and just kind of this.
I'm just here.
Yeah.
It's actually kind of funny because I do think that I fall like, because of like how I grew into tattooing, I feel like I stand right now in a weird intersection between like what has happened in the last 2 years specifically, and then also like tattooing in general, because I basically like grew up in a tattoo shop, or like my first experiences in tattooing were in a shop in Venice, and like I learned a lot of tattooing from them specifically. But I think a lot of tattooing from the last 2 years, I would call like COVID tattooing,
right,
has been like private studios, like private everything. And the experiences are a lot different for each one, because right now I'm in a private studio.
Mm-hmm.
I do really miss like a shop environment. But so the demographic has shifted a lot because of like who's now tattooing. So many of these new private shops have like popped up in LA specifically. I feel really like, I have like friends in this space, but I also have friends in this space, and like they have very different ideas about tattooing in general. That, I'm just here in my own corner.
Because I think what you're kind of also saying is that, if you would continue to work in a shop and you work your way up, whatever that hierarchy is, it's still learning from people, right? It's still learning from different artists at any level of talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're showing you things that they do. And that's one of the things I was thinking about before talking to you was like years ago, before Instagram and social media and all of that, if you wanted to know what was thought to be a good tattoo style or what was a hip tattoo style to get, like what's the thing? Well, either you had to go into a tattoo parlor, which was a little intimidating for a lot of people. And it was a time, say in the 80s and early 90s, where women weren't really getting tattooed as much where you could see it, right? They might have tattoos, but it would be on a shoulder or it would be somewhere where it wasn't visible. And so for, say, your average college girl, they might not want to go into like a tattoo shop, which was male dominated as well in terms of the type of artists. And now it's a completely different world, because if even someone like myself, if I wanted to see what cool tattoos were out there, I might pick up like Tattoo Magazine or one of the few magazines. But now that's almost passé that they have these magazines because
vintage.
Right? And so you'd see that and it was interesting and cool, but what's happening now with tattoo art is so different. Like if you're just living in a kind of bubble of just what other tattoo artists are doing, if you're trying to do something outside of that, your main people that are going to tell you yes or no are other tattoo artists, right? And there's like the idea of what you should do. And they might say, I don't like that, or that's not good. Like, but you see the type of stuff that's getting tattooed onto people and the styles of things that are getting tattooed. Like, I saw an Instagram video of somebody who just does nothing but like food tattoos on people.
Oh, it's really funny because this is kind of like what I'm saying too, with like this new wave of tattooing that's coming along. And there's like trends, like everything, there's trends. And like funny food tattoos. But there's some people that will only do like this like spiky, I think it's kind of like a running joke amongst like other tattooers. But it's like this spiky fairy goth Y2K style that's like it's kind of like, it's not necessarily like tribal, but it has like certain elements that like borrow from those designs. But it's I I wish I could just show you right now. Actually. That's not going to be helpful for the podcast.
No, probably not.
But I'm trying to say that this like funny trend is coming along, and it's getting a lot of like yes or no from different tattooers based on like who I'm talking to. They're like, oh, that's so cool and like cute and like, wow, good for them. And then I also hear a lot of like, oh my God, that's insane. Like, why would you do that? Or like, that's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're just looking at tattoos for ideas as a guy who likes tattoos, like I'll look on Instagram and I'll see somebody who's doing something that is so completely outside of what anyone else is doing.
Right.
And it looks awesome. Now, whether or not you want to get that as a tattoo or not, I don't know. It's everyone's different.
Yeah.
But it's so cool. And then you look and you're like, oh, that person's in Austria, or that person's like on the
Spain, Canada.
Absolutely other side of the world. But I love it because it allows there to be this level playing field of what's possible. Right. It's not just an idea. Look, this person does this. Like, and I had put down some trends too, because I wanted to kind of ask you about them. And of course, would you describe your style as kind of neo-traditional?
Not necessarily, because I think when I think of neo-traditional, I think of like a lot of dramaticness. I don't know what else to describe. Kind of like, Alphonse Mucha, like that, but like tattooified and like more focused on like maybe like just the head of a woman or like just like certain details. It's super dramatic. A lot of like really continuous gradients of color. And then like a lot of like embellishing with like, whether it's abstract with like just like smoke or something, or if it's just like flowers on the side, or just to make the whatever focus of it look way more.
Right.
Yeah.
But your art reminds me of, and I'm not sure if you know the artist, but there's an artist, her name is Ja Cooper. Do you know Ja Cooper?
Yeah, I think I used to follow them.
And
yes,
she's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's not an exact, but I think there's elements of it where I see that, and it has that gives me that same feeling. Mm-hmm. And she's great. I own a couple of small pieces of hers, but now she does almost strictly animals. She used to do beautiful women and almost kind of fairy type stuff. But now it's like, specifically, it seems, I think she's a big nature person. I think she loves to go out in nature. And so a lot of the stuff she does now tends to be animals, but it's so cool. I mean, I don't know. I hope you take that as a compliment, because
thank you.
Because I really do think she's awesome. But so, I was thinking about like some of the stuff that I see online that I just wonder what you think of. Like, have you heard of this trash polka tattooing or trash tattoos?
Like ignorant style?
I don't know if that's another way to put it, but it's pretty much like
whatever.
It has a definite style to it. It doesn't just seem like random, but it's crazy. And I'm just curious because it's artistic, but it's almost abstract. And the people that do it or that have it, it's large pieces that extend all over the body, and it's jarring. It's not necessarily like, oh, that's amazing. It's like you see it and it's making a statement.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that ever took off, because I see some people have it, but it's not something I see a lot of.
I think the style, like every time I see stuff like that where it's more abstract, it's like not your typical, quote unquote, typical tattoo. It's not really like trying to portray a specific like subject matter. It's just like designs and like imagery on someone. I think it's really amazing, and in two ways. Like one, it's amazing because it's like, that's amazing and it looks cool. The second one is that it's amazing because you really need a lot of negative space too for a lot of these designs. Like they rely a lot on having a completely empty space for that design to look on its own, right?
Yeah, because it doesn't, at least as near as I can tell, you couldn't like have a bunch of more traditional looking tattoos and then have that around it. Exactly. It just does not work.
Exactly. So the thing about those is that you need all this empty space, and then you can't get like other stuff next to it, because then it'll just mess up like what you have going on.
The whole aesthetic
is
screwed up. Yeah.
So that to me is amazing too, because they're willing to just be like, I'm not going to get, or I don't know. Of course, they can still go get more tattoos, but like they do, if we're,
It's usually more of the same type of stuff.
they'll like leave it like to keep it in that way, or like to keep that imagery going. I think that's cool.
Yeah. Just going back a little bit, like, so when you were, before you were any kind of artist, let alone tattoo artist, what was, not counting what maybe your parents might have thought was the direction for you, what was the thing? What was the dream job? What was the thing you wanted to do? And maybe it's tattooing. I don't know. I'm just asking.
I mean, honestly, I didn't really know, but I really liked the idea of going into animation or illustration or something like that, which I have a couple of clients that do work in that kind of thing, or like concept design, and I think they're so cool. And it's crazy that they come and get work done by me, and I'm like, oh my God, like you're working the job that like I might have wanted to do when I was younger.
But couldn't you still do it? You're still young.
I mean, yeah, I think that I do have to learn. I have to go to school for it because they use different equipment that I mean, maybe I could self-teach, but I would really need to work on like certain projects that I think that need to be of industry, like up to par with industry. And I think there's some pretty cool schools out there that do offer programs like that.
Oh, yeah.
But I think a lot of them are like not in person, and I don't like that.
You mean it's like over like the internet
Zoom.
or Zoom? Yeah. No, I think you really do need, especially with art.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't, like, I don't know, like, I can't focus when I'm on Zoom. I'm like, what's going on?
Well, I think it's like you need, I was talking to one of the friends of mine who owns the Hubert School of Comics and Design and Animation and all that. And we were kind of talking about, because they had to do a lot of Zoom stuff because they're in New York City or they're in New Jersey. And I was like, like I like going on to YouTube, for example, and somebody will say, well, here's how you draw a head in a cartoony way, or here's how you draw this or that. And it's fine and you can do it.
Yeah.
But what you really need is somebody that, like a teacher or somebody that goes, oh, no. Let me show you my trick. Like, this is how I do it. Like, this is how I conceptualize. And maybe you don't say it that way, but they're showing you things that help you to jump miles ahead.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that,
it's like you got it. Well, you'll eventually learn it yourself. Like if you do it enough times. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is actually really funny because, so you know how I said that in high school, I like didn't know about schools having like art programs and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I only found out because my mom found this program in Irvine, which is like a city away from where we lived, it was basically like a college prep program for people who wanted to do an art school. And so they would help these students like create portfolios that they could submit to the school as part of their application. And when I went there, that's when I met like a bunch of other students that were like, we are on our way to RISD, or like we're on our way to Art Center, like this is like what we want. And it was pretty intense. Like it seemed pretty high pressure. Like these students were like not there to like mess around. It was just like, we're here to like grind.
Yeah. We're here to suck all the joy out of drawing and art.
Oh, I was really intimidated because like I had come out from like a different, like no one at our school was like this. So I was like, oh my God, like I'm so behind. Like I have to, but I mean, I only went there to like check it out and like take like, I took one life drawing class, but the instructors there were kind of like that. They like knew industry stuff and they had worked in the industry, and they like, whenever they would come around and help you, they would, here's my quick and dirty way of doing whatever. Or like, you like really do this. And then it was cool. Like I really admired a lot of those teachers because they just like went through all the stuff and then were like, hey, and they were really nice too. So that was kind of,
well, it's definitely encouraging. I think if you spend a lot of time around other creative people, and there's like this Buddhist kind of thing about don't be too stingy with the Dharma, if you've got the knowledge, like share it, don't keep hold it to yourself.
The teachers like never share everything to the next generation. So like knowledge gets
they're like, no, I'm not. Yeah, I don't want to. So when people do, it's helpful. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so you wanted to get into animation. Like what kind of animation? Like what were you watching that was like, this is really kick-ass?
I like animated movies.
Animated movies.
Yeah, but honestly, I didn't really know how or like what was going on or like what I needed to do to get there. And I wasn't in a space where I could like do a lot of research about it either, mentally speaking. So I didn't really pursue that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because there's the idea of what you think you want to do, and it's sometimes pie in the sky, or like it's like, oh, it's a dream, it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But anything is possible in this world,
yeah.
And I don't mean that in some kind of Pollyanna way. I really do believe now that people can do.
I think if you like really, really want to do something, you're gonna make it happen, like no matter what. Like if you really want to.
Absolutely, and I think there's something to be said for not being another drone in the art school world, or in say my case, being in film and TV, not going to film school where they turn out basically just carbon copies of the same thing, and that you need to live and have your own experiences, and your style grows that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I was working in my 20s at a corporate job I didn't really particularly care for, but they would pay for school. Like if you were going to go for a business degree, they would pay for it.
Right.
And I just didn't want to do that because it wasn't my calling. It wasn't what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, another big part of it was, okay, I'm working 40 hours a week at a job I can't fucking stand. And then I'm going to go to school at night. And like, when am I going to have enough living to write about? So I didn't end up going to school for that. And I ended up spending a lot of time going to Vegas, for example, like with friends and stuff. And I never had 2 cents, but I would go and I would win money and I would lose it. And at one point, I remember I was in a casino and I would get really drunk too, because, you're young, you're like 21, it's Vegas, but I was a belligerent drunk. So that's one of the reasons why I don't drink now, because I was just belligerent. Not mean, but just out of control.
You're just chaotic.
And I remember I was at a blackjack table and I was just being drunk and an idiot. And the pit boss came over to me and he says, "If you don't shut the fuck up, I'm going to bounce you out of here." And I was like, huh? and of course I started apologizing because I wasn't mean-spirited. I was like, "Oh, sorry," like the worst, total worst. Because I'm thinking, "Oh no, I'm really sorry." And he's like, "Listen, while you've been sitting here, you have won and lost $7,000.
Oh, for real?
Yeah. And I'm like, huh? And that sobered me up a bit at the time. And what I remember about that was,
you broke even.
I mean, I had made money, and back then I would make more money than I do now, because you're just crazy when you're had a few, because you don't have the inhibitions that would stop you from saying, "I'm going to put all this money," or "I'm going to bet all this money." You're more okay. But the point is, I spent all that time in casinos on weekends with friends, and I got to see what that world was. And so that's what inspired me to write the first movie that I ever had made, which was called The Cooler. And it was about a guy who was unlucky, so unlucky he had infectious bad luck. And that is only born out of the fact that I just spent time around these interesting characters, and that life lesson was around. Had I gone to school, I mean, I just wouldn't have had that.
Probably gotten so jaded too about everything.
Yeah. So I think, there's, like I said, something can be said for kind of, going your own way and really just being you. And so that you're not, because one thing's for sure, it's like if someone looks at your tattoos, they're not going to say, "Oh, she's like, there's like 50 other, 100 or 1,000 other Leslie Youngs out there I can go and get something like this from." It's like, you have an original-ish style, don't you think? I mean, there's enough traditional about it that you say, "Oh, okay, it's not so out there that it's," and that may change, right? Like 10 years from now, you may have adapted into something completely different.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because a lot of apprentices, like their mentors will have them start off with American traditional because it teaches you all like the basic stuff, but that wasn't the case for me. And so eventually had I gone through like different styles, and then it was like me being like, why haven't I done any American traditional yet? Like, what is up with this? And then I tried just check it out a little bit and draw in that style. And like I would copy like Sailor Jerry or, you know, stuff. And then I was like, oh, this is actually really neat and like very flexible in terms of.
But but you wouldn't know that from just looking at it, right?
Right,
Like it's only through the process of doing it.
Right.
I think that's awesome. So when you are thinking about your art career, maybe you're not even thinking about your art career. You're just thinking, what am I going to do? Right? You're not maybe as put together about it in your head.
I'm like, what's going to happen next month?
Right. So how do you come to, like, do you get a job working in a tattoo shop with the idea that you're going to tattoo, or where you're like, hey, it's an artistic place. It's got a lot of creativity. I'm going to go there and see what's up.
Like for me specifically or for anybody?
For you.
Well, I really wanted to tattoo once I found out what tattooing was. And I was like, well, people do this? Like, what? I really wanted to do it. But I had no friends that had tattoos and I have friends that tattooed. And no one in my family was tattooed. Like, I had no leads. Like, not a single one.
Yeah, that's what's weird to me. It's not like...
Yeah, it wasn't like I had a friend. Because, you know, everyone who's like, oh, well, my friend tattooed, so I... You know, it's always like that. Literally, it's just nepotism. Not in a bad way. But, like, it's like your friend got you into something. Like, oh, my friend... But so I did a lot of, like... It was really scary because I didn't know anything. And I don't think that shop really wanted to apprentice anybody, to be honest. I think they just wanted... extra hands, which is like fine because I learned so much while I was there, even though I wasn't apprenticing.
Well, yeah, because who goes to work at a tattoo shop without an interest
in tattooing?
Yeah.
Some people, but
I mean, maybe because it's like a cool place to work.
Yeah, it's a cool place to hang out.
But, you know, that's not a long-term solution, right?
I mean, I definitely wanted to tattoo. It was clear to me. I just didn't know like what was going on. I didn't know any of the etiquette, or I didn't know the traditions. How the hell would I know the traditions?
Right.
And I didn't know. I just like kept going though. I just kept like going to work, learning different things every day, like no matter what was going on. Even if it was a slow day, I was like.
So really what you're saying is that you just kind of, I don't want to say you just wandered into it, because it sounds like you had a certain level of... No, I definitely
tried really hard to like, even like not necessarily an apprenticeship, but like to even just work at a shop, like was kind of stressful and hard because, well, obviously no one's like, we need, like
they're not real friendly to people, right? Like that's
I don't know.
The other thing.
I think the only place, like, I don't even know how they would like put like, it's not like Yellow Pages where you're like, we need like shop help or whatever, where you can like, I just like contacted all of the tattoo shops that were within my vicinity, not knowing like what they did or like who they were or anything. I just really wanted to be in the scene and be like with these creative people because I knew that they knew things that I could at least watch.
Did somebody take you under their wing in a way and let's say, hey, are you interested? Because if you hang around long enough, they're going to know that you're not just somebody who's going to be there for a couple of months and then leave, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky situation. And yes, someone did take me under their wing, and I'm super grateful for them because they basically
gave
me my life. We don't really talk anymore, but I still like admire this person from afar. But yeah, so the shop doesn't really do a good job of like teaching. That shop in particular, I mean, I know there's lots of shops that do this. They'll just kind of like have you around. They're like, they tell you you're apprenticing, but they don't really teach you anything. But I did learn as like someone who is good at like watching and like, okay, they're doing that thing, like write it down or like remember that or whatever. So that's how I learned, which just kind of worked out for me because I understand that other people might need someone to tell them, or they might need like different, people just learn differently.
Right, yeah.
But I think for someone like me, I was pretty happy with like, just like stealing information.
Whatever you could
like
get.
Setting someone up and like learning what their setup was, or like breaking someone down and being like, oh, like, why are they using this?
See, that's like a highly motivated way to look at it, right? Because you're thinking if somebody's not offering the information, you're going to find a way to get it.
Right. And I wasn't even sure if I was allowed to like ask questions because, sometimes like it just didn't, I didn't feel like welcome at all, to be honest, in the space, even though there was a lot of like older dudes that I wouldn't even talk to them because I was so scared of like what they would say. I knew one of them didn't like me.
They were probably scared of you.
Well, one of them didn't like me at all because, so I was working for the shop at the moment and I would basically like help pay out the artist at the end of the day. And since I was like really good at math, I could like do the calculations pretty easy. And like, I would just double check with them. Hey, you got this. And it was just pretty simple stuff for me. But one of the artists was like arguing with me about like what the number they got. And I was like, no, it's this. And they were like, no, it's this. And we got into it and I was like, dude, like, I'm just explaining to you like basic math.
This is like, math. I'm not like, there's nothing else.
Like, this is facts. Like, this is it. Yeah. From then on, it was like a weird tension. Mm. But aside from that, it didn't help. This doesn't help, but I really like idolize them too. Cause I'm like, oh my God, I do this with a lot of tattooers that I meet too. I'm like, oh my God, they're so good. Like, I'm like too shy to tell them that like I draw or like I tattoo or whatever too. And that plus just being nervous around people was like not a good combination to be like, oh, like, so I noticed that you were using this, like, why do you do that? Or like, how did you get started or something like that? So I had to resort to just doing like my thing of just being observant and just watching and then copying and seeing what.
And so the reason why I'm kind of going down this road is because one of the things that I talk to people about in these interviews is creativity and the idea that you're not a creative person because you had one great idea one day off the top of your head. You're creative because the first 1,000 ideas may have not been quite there, but you went to the 1,001st idea, right? Or you kept on going.
Yeah.
And so no one talks about, and that's one of the things when I say when people kind of underestimate what it takes to do something artistic, they don't understand that the creative process is...
It's stupid. Like you're insane.
You're insane. And that it is something that is, the difference between a creative person and a non-creative person, at least in their minds, is that they just stop. They stop, they might say, oh, I tried to think of something, but I had 2 ideas and they suck, so I just stopped. And I'm like, well, that's why. It's like, because my theory is creativity is problem solving. And if anybody in the world, if you've ever solved a problem, you're being creative. So that's the kind of thrust of this whole podcast. But the idea is that from what I'm hearing from you is you had seen a lot of what would be conceived by others as barriers, as a closed group of people that aren't necessarily interested in revealing their secrets to you.
Yes.
And you were like, well, I'll just keep going. And so why didn't you, because from what you're saying to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were shy.
Well, first of all, shy. And then also it's just like, I'm glad that I didn't just like elbow my way through and just be like, what's this? Because like, yes, while that may have sped up my learning process a lot, and I think a lot of people do that, I also think that's incredibly rude sometimes. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm like, they're just doing their job. Like, they don't need someone to be at them all the time. So being conscious of that, I was like, oh my God, like, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be like that annoying shop help girl who's just like, what's that? What are you doing there? Like, like that's so rude.
Well, you kind of erred on the side of caution, right?
But a little bit too much, I think. Like, I think it would have been totally okay if I was like, here and there being like, what's this? And I think that because I wasn't asking those questions, people might be like, oh my God, she's not even interested in learning. She's not asking any questions. When in reality, you're just
dying to ask a question, but you just haven't.
Yeah. So it's really difficult to like surpass that barrier or be like, is it okay for me to ask? Or like, is it okay for me to like do these things with all these like social things in mind? Which I think is really interesting because my next point is that the mentor that had taken me under his wing is Japanese, and he learned in Japan, where all those social rules are super relevant, especially in a traditional Japanese mentorship. You don't even ask questions. You're not allowed to. So it's like, while I could, as like, someone in America and like whatever, I still was like,
You're kind of honoring the kind of...
And like the way I was raised too, like Confucianism, and like you respect your elders. You don't like be a disturbance for your elders. So it's like all those things coming together in the way that I got into tattooing. Well, it was drawn out and it's incredibly painful because of those things. It's kind of funny because I think about it now. I'm like, wow, that was stupid.
Well, because and we never, maybe our own self-concept isn't the same as what other people see. Like me, I see you as like this kind of rock star, right? And you may say, I don't know if I believe that, or because you're just you.
Yeah.
But other people they see you as this thing, and maybe that's not fair because you live your own life but we tend to admire the people that, one, go after something that they really want, and two, are really good at it, and three, are humble. Like humility is a huge thing for me. Like I hate cocky people. Totally hate. Like it just makes me sick because people can have massive amount of skills, and that's great, but and they're blessed in that way, and they may have worked really, really super hard for it, which totally I get.
Right.
But just just that ounce of humility kind of goes a long way for me, and I do feel like you're fairly unassuming as a person, and I'm not just kissing your ass. I'm just trying to say that you kind of have kind of gone through your little journey to get to where you're at now.
Right.
But you didn't step on anybody's head to do it. You were kind of one-minded about like, okay, well, this is what I want, so this is what I'm going to do. And I think that's important for other people to hear because people feel like they don't know what their options are. But there's a couple things. Like my generation is like the low self-esteem generation, right? Where like our parents are the ones that are like, children should be seen and not heard, and you're not supposed to have feelings, and right. And so we feel like we're not good enough. So therefore we find something that we think we want to do so that we'll end up proving to ourselves and to whoever it is, the voice of our father or our mother or brothers or our family, that we're good enough.
Right.
And that's fine. So for me, that's why I wanted to become a writer. My dad was a big movie fan. So I thought, well, if I become a movie writer, then I'll be good enough. Well, the thing is, you're good enough anyway, but you don't know that at the time. And when that all kind of came to fruition, something really amazing happened. It was also kind of tragic in a way, which was that none of it delivers on the promise. Like whatever in your mind you think is going to solve by gaining the success in the field you want to work in, it's its own reward and it's a huge accomplishment, and there's lots of pluses and minuses to that. But that has nothing to do with all your childhood shit and your childhood baggage. Like that is not going to get solved, at least directly.
Right.
So that was one of those things for me, is that came from, which is more my point, low self-esteem and going, okay, I will be good enough. Later generations, and we kind of know people like this where they have way too much self-esteem, but they don't have neither the talent nor the abilities, but they think that they're the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And that's a strange thing. And that's not everybody, but I'm saying this is something you see. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be somebody who is really down on themselves so they don't feel like they're good enough. And then now you have people who think they're good enough, but they haven't done any of the work because they've learned all their entire life that they're the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I meet people like that, but it just like, it doesn't make sense to me because like, what the heck, like, what are you even doing? Like, what are you doing? Right. But I think that also like social media plays like a big part in this because a lot of people are super, big on social. And I think that like, I can imagine it being like a huge confidence boost being like, oh, I like have these many people like saying that I'm amazing. I don't know. I think that I do a lot of internal work when I'm trying to be creative or trying to do my work. It's always just me talking to myself, and like no matter what someone is saying, even if they're like, I love this, it's like still my own word that like moves me the most, essentially. Like
what I try and tell people too is that the barrier to creativity for a lot of people is the self-critic that says, oh, you suck, right? Or that's lame. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily a barrier because it's the same person that's making me do more and like continue to keep pushing. Well, that's true. But the difference is you don't necessarily listen to it, right? Because some people hear that and stop. You hear it and go, okay, I can always be better, right? And so then, as long as it's not perfection, because you'll never reach it. Mm-hmm. So my question to you then would be, like, what keeps you going whenever you feel like you've reached the end of your rope in terms of creativity or some creative project? Yeah. Because at some point, like, how do you talk yourself into it?
Yeah, because, this is funny because I'm year of the ox, mm-hmm. and growing up, my parents like made fun of me for it because I was born, year of the ox, and then in September when school starts, and then also at like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. And to them, it's like really funny because that's like what a really hard worker does. Gets up really early in the morning, right at the beginning of the school year, like when things are starting. And year of the ox is like super hardworking animal symbol in like the Chinese zodiac. And so they're like, Leslie, you're like doomed to like a life full of work and
of labor.
Like, yeah. And I was like, okay, but like it obviously doesn't matter. It's just like,
Well, I think you may have touched on something that is important, which is that you do work all the time, right?
I do.
But you do what you love, so it's kind of like it's a little easier to.
Yeah. Well, this is funny because even if I wanted to say, oh my God, brain juice is emptied. I am not creative at all. I'm done. Like I've messed up this flash sheet. I can't finish it. I just feel like so, and I did feel this actually really recently because mm-hmm. I'm doing another flash batch for this month. But I was like, I hate myself right now. This sucks. So I put it away and I was like, I should just quit. Like, just like in my mind, like I'm so bad.
I have nothing left. Yeah, it's empty inside.
This is it. I've peaked. Like it's just downhill from here. But then literally like I woke up like the next morning and I was like, oh, you know what? Like, let me go back. So I can't even help it if I like felt that way. It's just like, I'm stubborn and I will go back and try to finish it. Even if it's like, no, this is a lost cause. Give me like 2 hours, like I'll be back on it. Like it's just
see, and I'm not saying that other people can't be like that, because I think people can train themselves to say, okay, I'm going to give this another go.
Yeah,
but that's the difference between somebody who can be successful and in their own way, than somebody who just says the hell with it, because there's nothing wrong with saying, I have nothing left to give. No, I'm over. I'm done.
I think I'm just like really stubborn and like stupid too, because this will show in like other things if I'm doing something wrong. But I think if I just keep doing it, like something will change. Like I'll just keep doing it. And that's also really like an ox bullish type behavior. It's like you're ramming into like a wall. Like this is the end. That's it. Like, no, I'm going to keep going.
So maybe it makes sense that you're the ox because you are.
I'm not like thinking either really necessarily with like, I guess like the logical side of my brain. I'm just going for it.
This is the message people need to hear in life, whether it's from you or from me or from anyone else, is that because what'll happen is I'll work on a script, that could take me months.
Yeah.
And then it goes out into the town and it could be dead within 72 hours.
Yeah.
Like Friday, sometimes this is great, but then by the time Sunday rolls around, it's dead. Mm-hmm. And that is such a bummer because you put all of this time and effort into it. And what I tell people, what I do is, and it's a weird conscious choice I make, is I say, I give myself one day to be really bummed about it. Like then I'll have my little pity party for one day. And then the day after that, I just get on with it.
Yeah.
Because I get it, it's disappointing, but like, what am I going to do? I have to keep going.
Yeah. I think that's really relevant for tattoo stuff that like I want to do, like personal projects. Like, I don't know if you know, but I like send out these emails with like designs that I like. And sometimes it's like really successful. Like almost every design gets taken, or like, people want modified versions of all of them or whatever. And that's like, great. Like, wow, I can't believe, like, thank you. But like, sometimes I send them out and like not a single person replies, and it's just like no one wanted. And I spent all this fucking effort like drawing these up, coloring, like doing pre-colored designs, like all this stuff, and like crickets. Or I'll get like an email being like, "These are great," but like not asking to get them tattooed, and I'm like, "Thanks."
You should try something crazy. You should send the same flash out like the next month and see what the response is. They go, these are awesome. And you're like, okay, you fuckers didn't even look at the last email.
And like, it's funny because like the email blast thing that I have, it like shows me like who opened them and like who did.
Oh, so you just torture yourself at this point.
I'm like, why do I even bother? Like, why is this part of the program? Like, why does it allow me to look at these things? But I really shouldn't even bother. And for the most part, like, people do respond pretty positively to them. And I do hear it a lot. And I'm thankful for that.
I think the thing that I think it's interesting about that you do that is that, and maybe a lot of tattoo artists do it, but I don't have, relationships, like working relationships or anything with a whole bunch of tattoo artists.
Right.
But you're pretty prodigious. Like you send out stuff like all the time. I mean,
I try to be consistent about it. And like, it's kind of funny because I used to get really down when someone would like cancel an appointment or like reschedule. Because I'm like, damn, like I was looking forward to doing this. And like, I really wanted to, But then I spend that time drawing other new designs instead, and I think it really helps me.
It's hard to separate yourself from the situation, right? Because there's a million reasons why someone isn't here. Probably number one is probably financial, right? Because it's a financial commitment to get it done. When I was looking to have someone do my tattoo, and I would send, "Hey, this is what I'm looking at," and I would get this kind of form email back that basically says, it's $300 an hour, and it's 6 hours minimum, and it's $1,800, and I want like X amount up front. And I'm like, I don't even fucking know you, and like that. I'm sorry, like I'm sure you're great, and they are. You can see their work. It's not that they're bad, but you're like, whoa, and so did it thin me out of? Yes, it did, because it's not that it's not worth it, but like if I have a tattoo that's a certain size and they're saying it's a 6 hour minimum, but they're essentially saying is, I don't want to do any small tattoos. I want to do big pieces.
Right.
And I think that you get to a point where you can start demanding this type of thing,
Yeah. I think like, and they're right. If they want to do work that they don't want, if there's like work that they don't want to do, they should be able to say no to those things.
So, so if you, not so much like a young tattoo artist out there, but just in general, in terms of your creative process, like what would you say to somebody that, if somebody you met either came in here or you met them somewhere and they were an up and coming artist and they just didn't know if they had it in them or not, but you could kind of see that they're doing more than just doodling like they have some skill there that could be developed. Like what's the advice you give to artists that to kind of push them over the top?
For what? Like they
just in general. I mean, because not so much to say to be a tattoo artist, which is its own thing, but
I mean,
or do you not give people advice?
Like much to say, because it really is your own like voice telling you what to do. You know what I'm saying? Like if you personally are like, I really want to do this, and like everything about you inside of you is telling you, do this, then like you're going to do it, right? Mm-hmm. If you're feeling hesitant because XYZ and the voice inside you is stronger than those hesitations, you're going to end up doing it.
Okay, last question.
Yes.
And I think I asked you this before, but I want to have it on tape.
Oh, I don't
This fascination and love of Garfield. Like, where did that come from?
Oh, okay. So this is funny because, so as a kid, I went to the public library a lot, and we would do all of like the reading programs for kids, like, summer reading, where you like read and then you get like coupons to Rubio's, like free candy and like, I don't know, whatever. So we did all those programs. So we would go all the time. And I love the library. It's like the best thing ever. And they came to a point where I like got bored of reading, because when you just read that much as a kid, you're like, I've read the library. But there was a section for like comics and stuff, and I found like booklets of like Garfield comic collections, and they'd be like from this year to this year.
Yeah.
So it was like a lot. And I would get all of them at the same time because no one ever checked them out. They were like just sitting there like untouched. And so I would get like 6 books of like Garfield comics, and I would just read them all the time. And they were so, I remember them. Actually, there were like a few that I liked that I would like bookmark and be like, oh, I really like this one.
Of Garfield comics.
Yeah. But actually, I went back pretty recently to read some, and they're really not that funny.
Well,
sorry, Jim Davis. But like Garfield's character is like really charismatic, I think, because he's so sassy and like violent towards John, who I used to feel bad for, but now I don't.
right.
Anyway, so I read those like aggressively for a few years. Actually, no, like one year maybe. Like I would read them, return them, get other stuff for the next week, get other stuff for the next week, and then like go back and reread them. So it was like I have this like weird bank of like Garfield knowledge.
Listen, I've taken up enough of your time. I hope this wasn't too annoying.
No, we're good. We're out on time.
And if somebody wants to come and schedule time with you, what's the best place to find you? Whether it's Instagram and or
you can
your
just
website?
look up leslieyoungism.com or Instagram Leslie Young ISM, and then my link, like there's like a booking link in my bio.
Yeah, so they can just find you there.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's very reasonable.
Yeah.
She's very good.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. If you enjoyed this content, please do me a favor and like, comment, and share it. Or you can subscribe to this podcast by going to www.bestworstideapodcast.com.